Today we're going to be taking a look at Herelink and specifically how to set it up after performing the new firmware update. Now in this video I'm not going to show you how to actually do the firmware update, but I will release a separate video on that, so please do check it out. What we're going to do in this one is take a look at what you need to do to set it up after actually performing the update and get your sticks calibrated and all of your buttons set as well. Now this update is quite a big one and it has quite a large number of changes, including a new Herelink settings app that moves all of the RC calibration and binding into a new area on the remote, and I'm going to talk you through that as well and show you where you set the FCC outputs, for instance, and how you do the actual calibrations and set it up. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at setting the launcher, and I'm going to take you through it step by step, and by the end of this you should have your Herelink basically up and running with all of the basics done. And what I will do is then in a separate video I'll actually take you through all of the changes, take a closer look at Solex itself, and give you guys an overview of how to do some of the other things that these new features bring. Okay, after the system update completes, the first thing you will need to do is select the launcher. Now the advice here is to set the Herelink launcher as the default one unless you have a specific reason to set it as system updates. So once you select Herelink launcher, click all. It will then take you to the new home screen where you will find Q ground control as well as the new Solex TX app. Now in the new updates all of the control functionality has been moved outside of the apps, and the main radio controls, some new S-Bus button config as well as the RC configuration is now located in a new Herelink settings app. To get access to this you need to swipe down from the top, and here you will see Herelink settings and radio status labelled here. We're going to simply click on that and it takes us into the new radio, joystick and buttons configuration screen. Now after the update the first thing you will need to do is pair your unit. So you need to pair the air unit to the ground station. To do this you very simply press the pair button. On the air unit itself you simply press and hold the button until it comes up and says pairing complete, and when it is correct you will see pairing successful appear on the screen, and then you will see the uplink and uplink bandwidth rate kick in as well as the controller signal strength and everything else. Now that the remote and the air unit is paired, moving down this screen you have a few more options. The first is the output modes, which allows you to set the output to United States for FCC or Europe for CE, and then you've got China and Japan. Below that you then have the video sharing option, and this allows you to actually share video from the Herelink ground station with an external computer, either via tethered Wi-Fi or the USB connection, and you can actually share video and telemetry into Mission Planner, and I will talk about this on another video, but that does need to be enabled before that function will work. Moving over to the joystick screen, quite a lot here has now changed. We have the same overall look, however there are now more options. First of all, on the left hand side we have the stick input display, and next to each one of these you have the option to reverse the channel. So for instance, if I click on the throttle one and click on rev, click save, that will actually reverse the output on the throttle stick. Whilst it doesn't show it on the display here, it actually does reverse the S-Bus output. Moving over to the right hand side along the bottom you have the options for the hardware wheel, the S-Bus output for it, as well as the throttle 0 and mode controls. The hardware wheel channel allows you to change the channel output that the wheel actually is on, so from 5 all the way up to channel 16. You then next to that have the S-Bus output for the wheel as well, whether you want it on the S-Bus 1 channel or the S-Bus 2 channel that the Herelink has. Below this you have the throttle center 0 option. This allows you to set the throttle for say fixed wing use and rather have it that the center of the throttle stick is 0, and then moving it all the way up moves it to the full PWM range, rather than have the center throttle position as midpoint. And then finally, next to this on the right hand side, you have the option for setting the mode of the remote controller, whether it be mode 1, mode 2, mode 3 or mode 4. The next thing you're going to want to do is do your calibration of your sticks. Now, the first one you want to look at is the hardware wheel calibration. So to do this, you simply tap on the screen and it will then bring us into the calibration window. Now here it has both the option to calibrate as well as do a test on the wheel as well. The first thing we're going to want to do is click Start Roller Wheel, and then we're going to move it to its furthest extremes on either side. And as you do this, you can actually see the values change. And once you've done it to the point where you've got it, you then simply click complete. The next thing you can then do is move it just to check that it is working as it should be. And once that's done, you simply click pass, and that is the main gimbal wheel calibrated. The next thing you want to calibrate is your joysticks. So to do that, you simply click on the hardware joystick calibration. On this screen, there are two parts to be aware of. You have the left-hand part with the small remote control in the corner, and that is actually showing you what you need to do to calibrate the sticks. And on the right-hand side is actually an overlay of what the sticks are doing, and that is part of the testing algorithm when you've actually done the calibration. Just to note something before we proceed with the calibration, the area highlighted in the red box will not move whilst you are calibrating the sticks. When you calibrate, you hit the start calibration, you follow the instructions in the blue box as well as the blue circles showing you the direction to move the sticks. However, the stick test area in the red box on the right hand side will not move until after the calibration has been completed. This is perfectly normal behaviour. So the first thing we need to do is click Start Calibration, and then it's asking us, you can see with the little two red arrows, to move the sticks on the horizontal in and out plane. Then I'm going to click Next. It's then asking them to put us both in the top right hand corners. Click Next. It's now asking us to move the sticks in a clockwise direction at least 5 times. So what you're doing by this is moving your sticks to the full extremes of their movement, so the system is able to actually pick up how much movement there is on each one. Once you've done that, you move them back to the center and click Next. And then that is the main stick calibration done. Now, the next thing you can do is actually check they are performing as you would expect by looking at the bit on the right-hand side of the screen. And as you can see, you've got a little red dot and a black dot. Now, the black dot is your sticks moving, and the idea is to actually hit the red dot. So what we're going to do is move across to get to the red. And the idea is you do it until you hit each one, and this is actually testing that the sticks are functioning as you would expect them to be. And then it does a corner test for it, and it might mean a little bit of moving around. And the idea is to hit the dots, and once that's done, it allows you to hit pass, and that is set. The final thing you want to calibrate is the S-Bus output cal, and again this is setting the output channels on the S-Bus to make sure that they are correct. To do this, you hit that, and then you follow the on-screen instructions on the little box on the left hand side. Throttle up, throttle right, throttle left, and what this is then doing is actually doing the calibration for the S-Bus out. The next new screen on the system is the button configuration, and this allows you to configure the buttons on the Herelink ground station to various S-Bus channels depending on what you want to do. Before I show you this, I want to give you guys a warning. They do not advise that you map any buttons to mode selection for your aircraft. Mode selection should always be mapped to Mavlink commands within your chosen app, whether that be Q Ground Control or Solex TX. The way the software buttons work on Herelink means that there could be undesirable behavior should there be a failure and a reboot of the system if you were using S-Bus. And again, you should not use S-Bus controls for mode selection. We will take a look at programming modes in Solex as well as Q Ground Control later on in this video. Now, just to take you through how the new button screen works, on the left hand side here we have the option to select what button and what function that we want to do. So you've got a long press, a short press, all the way down to D, as well as the cam control button as well. You've then got the option to add that to the list below, and we'll show you that in a second. You've got the option to set profiles, load profiles, and save profiles as well. So you can actually have multiple button configurations on one unit. So before you configure the buttons, the first thing you will need to do is save a new profile. So we're going to click New and call this one Button 1. Click Save. And that button config will be the main config for the buttons we're going to use now. Also, when you save that, you will note that it will bring up a message warning you again not to use S-Bus buttons for mode selection. Okay, so now to show you how to configure the buttons. Now, there are multiple options within this. The first thing we're going to do is select a button that we want to configure. So we're going to say a short press. I'm going to click Add, and then the options for that button will appear below. On the left, we have the name, whereas next to it, you have the little bin symbol, which will delete the button. Next to that, you have M and T, and this sets the mode of the button. For instance, M would be momentary and T would be toggle. Next to this, we then have the options for the default value and active value, the channel, as well as the S-Bus output on the Herelink Air unit. So to configure the values, you can simply swipe back and forth, and this allows you to set the individual PWM values. You can scroll up and down on this, and if you want to jump straight to the top end of the scale, you can simply flick it backwards and get it then to the top end, and we've already hit there. So what we're going to do for this button, we're going to set it as a momentary value of 1100. Its default value is now 11. We're then going to set its active value a lot higher on the scale, so we'll set that one up at about 1500. And you can actually flick these values as well, as you can see, to get them up to where you want it to be. So I'm going to say 1550. There we go. That's that now set. And we're going to set that for S-Bus channel 6 on the bus number 1. So once I've set that, I'm going to click Save. Now, the way that would work is when I press a short press, the output will jump from 1100 to 1550. When I press a short press again, the output will jump back down to 1100. If I was to set this to M for momentary, the way it would work is if I press and hold A, it would jump to 1550, and when I release A, it would jump back down to 1100. So you have your toggle option and momentary option. There is also a third option on this as well, to have it as a multi-button configuration. To do this, what you would simply do is unselect the green and have it simply grayed out. Now, the way this works is it allows you to actually set an output to have multiple buttons control it to different values. So just to explain this a little bit more, what we're going to do is have channel 6 on a short press. We're going to go B short press, add that, and C short press as well, and add that. We're going to set all of these to channel 6 on S-Bus 1, and we're going to set the active values as different numbers. So what we're going to say is this: A short press will set this as 1200. We're going to say B short press sets this as 1500, and then C short press as something like 1800. Now, before we save that, you actually have to set one of these as the default button. What that means is when the system boots, it would set it to that output. So as standard, I'm going to actually set it as B short press as the default option and hit save. Now, the way this would work is follows. When the system would boot, it would set the output of channel 6 to to 1500. If I then press button A, it would set the value out to 1200. If I set button C, it would set the value to 1800. And if I press channel B, it would set the value to 1500. This is neither a toggle or momentary action. It is simply a command to change the value of the channel to that number which is shown in the active value. You have to set one of these buttons as the default action though for when the system boots up, otherwise it won't know what position to be in. So this does allow you to actually use multiple buttons to control one channel and set it to different values depending on what you want to do. Now what you cannot do is have a mixture of momentary, toggle and multi-action on the same channel. You can only configure it for one way or the other. So the multi option allows you to set one channel to multiple different values. However, if you didn't want to do it that way, for instance, we could actually disconnect that. We would then say we want channel A to set channel 6 to be a momentary value of around 1400. There we go, 1500. We'll set it to that. We could then set channel 7, for instance, to be on a toggle option between 1100 and 1500 for channel 7. And then for channel 8, we could say actually we want it to be a 2-button version on C short press to 1800. Or then we will then say C long press. Add that below, and we're going to say C long press to be 1100 and set that as the default button for channel 8. Click save, and then we have different buttons doing different configuration options. Also within this you have the option to set multiple button profiles. So we have saved this all under button 1. If we wanted to, we could click new, create a new config and call it button 2. Click OK, and you can now see that it gives us that as button 2. But we can now actually go, you know what, I don't want that, I don't want that, I don't want that on this one. Click save. But we could then click load and go to button 1 and return back to the profile that we had before. So you can now actually have multiple button configuration profiles stored within Herelink depending on what your application is and depending on what you're doing with the aircraft that day, for instance. So you can actually simply swap between button 1 and button 2 nice and easily. Now, as it's been said on the warning, and as I said at the start, you must not use S-Bus button configuration for mode control of your aircraft. To do this, you should be doing that within your specific app, and we'll take a look at the button config for each app now. Next, we're going to take a look at mapping buttons within the apps, and specifically Solex TX, and we'll take a little look at Q Ground Control as well. Herelink supports both mapping of buttons in S-Bus and Mavlink commands within the app. These two systems are totally independent, and whilst technically you do have the ability to map the same button to both an S-Bus command as well as a Mavlink command, you should be very careful in doing so. As I also mentioned, it is advised to only map mode selection via Mavlink commands, and what we're going to do is take a look at doing that now. In Solex, the first thing you need to do is open the app, then click on the little 3 lines in the top left corner, and then click on button mapping. Under here you will find the options for button A, B, C, D, the home button and the camera button. It's worth noting that the home button can only be mapped to a Mavlink command and cannot be mapped within S-Bus. It is also advised that the home button is mapped as your emergency return to launch button, and for me what I have done is actually mapped home under long press to return to launch. That way if I was having system problems I can simply press and hold it and give myself another get out of jail. Now, to map a button under Solex, the first thing you need to do is select the button you want to choose. Then you have a long press and a short press option for each button. To select for a click, for instance, we click on the little arrow, and under here you have the available Mavlink commands that are there. You have things such as vehicle mode, take picture, toggle video, camera switch, map, toggle video map, toggle HUD, set servo, non-latched servo, set relay, set a specific Mavlink command, arm the aircraft, disarm the aircraft, wheel settings and clear wheel settings. Now the first thing we're going to take a look at is vehicle mode. To set a button to control the modes, we're going to select vehicle mode for on click, select the little cog next to it and select the mode that we want it to do. So what for this one, we're going to use stabilized. We're then going to say on long click again, select vehicle mode, and for that I want to select loiter. Once you have set it, the next thing you need to make sure you do is click save. So on button A, I have now set it to control vehicle mode stabilized on click and loiter on long click. If I wanted to select a third or fourth mode, I would then need to map another button to actually send that Mavlink command for a different mode channel. So for instance, if I wanted to go to a third mode, I would say on click on B, set that to acro, click OK, click save. So I've now got the ability to set 3 modes via 2 buttons. Something you could actually do is set the long press of the home button to return to launch and the short press of it to one of the third flight modes if you wanted it, giving you the home button as well as say button A an option for setting the modes. The next options you have within the system is setting servo outputs on your autopilot. If we scroll down into the options on Mavlink, you will see that we have 2 options. We have set servo, set non-latched servo. That is basically setting either a toggled servo or a momentary servo action, depending on what one you want. If I then click on set servo for button C, and click configure, we can then choose the autopilot channel output that we wanted to control. Channel 1 to 8, for instance, on the cube is your standard motor outputs, then channel 9 is aux 1 all the way up to aux 4 onwards. So for me, what we're going to do is set channel 9, and we're going to say for that to set to 1800 PWM. So what I have now done is set servo on channel 9 to 1800. So when I short press button C, channel 9, which is aux 1, will go to 1800. If I then wanted to be able to use it as a toggle on or toggle off, for instance, we would then say set servo, set channel 9 again, and set that to 1100 on long press. So short press would send it to 1800, long press would send it to 1100. If I didn't want it to act as a latch on and latch off and wanted momentary, we would simply scroll to non-latching servo, click configure, and then you have 2 values to set. You have the on value and the off value. So I'm going to say the on value of 1800 and the off value of 1100. Click OK. We're going to remove that and we're going to set that for channel 9. So now button C, while press and holding, will go to 1800 PWM on aux 1, but when I release, it'll go back to 1100 PWM. So that way it is a momentary action switch. Within Solex, you also have the option to control a servo output via the wheel as well. To do this, you click on wheel settings, and here you can set the aux output or the channel output you want it to command, as well as the PWM value. So currently we've got it on channel 8 enabled 1000 to 2000, so that would be motor channel 8 on the wheel. It is worth noting that any of these commands that you are setting here are entirely separate, and this is the channel selection on the autopilot via ArdraPilot and not the actual S-Bus output. If you wanted to control it for S-Bus, you do that within the Herelink settings app that we took a look at earlier. Another nice feature that you can do within this as well, for instance, is the ability to change the channel the wheel controls on your autopilot. As you saw just now, we set it onto channel 8. However, if I wanted to, I could also then set this to change that to channel 9 on a button press. To do that, we would scroll down to wheel settings, do the configuration, and then say on a short press of this button, which is button D, we will set the wheel to channel 9 between 1000 and 2000 PWM. We can then say set the wheel to go to channel 10 on a long press. between 1000 and 2000 PWM. We do need to make sure we click enable on each one, click save. So the way that will work now is, currently the wheel as standard is set to channel 8. However, when I short press button D, it will jump and change channel 9. When I long press D, it will then jump and change channel 10. Now, if I wanted to get back to channel 8, I would actually need to map another button to reset it to go back to channel 8. And to do that, for instance, if I use the camera button on long press, you would say clear wheel settings, click save, and what would then happen is on D, as standard, the wheel would control channel 8, short press D, go to channel 9, long press D, go to channel 10, long press the camera button would reset the wheel back to channel 8 again. So you actually have the ability to control a gimbal in 3 different ways through Solex via the aux outputs on your autopilot. Now again, I will just mention it one more time that this is entirely controlling Mavlink commands via your autopilot and not specific S-Bus channels via the Herelink S-Bus output. Quickly jumping over to Q Ground Control, the map the buttons in here, you simply go into the buttons option under the settings, and here you can see options for 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. 0, for instance, is button A, and you can simply map the mode that you want to set it to within the software. So we're going to click on stabilized, and you map each button one at a time like that.